I never thought I'd be sitting in the grand dining room of my family's estate, waiting for the storm to hit. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of tension you only find when everything is about to collapse. My sister Laura sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured hands folded neatly in front of her. She was the one who always kept the peace, always followed the rules, at least the ones that suited her. I, on the other hand, had learned long ago that peace wasn't always worth it. Sometimes you had to make waves. And this time I was ready. "We need to address the growing concerns," Laura began, her voice steady but strained. "It's clear, Natalie, that your choices are undermining the stability of this family." She shot me a glance, but her gaze was more mechanical than caring. "It's not personal. It's just business. You've chosen to walk a different path." I clenched my jaw, staring at my wine glass, not trusting myself to speak just yet. They wanted to paint me as the problem, unpredictable, too ambitious, a liability. But in this game of family, who was really pulling the strings? My mother, seated to Laura's right, offered me a tight smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "We've given you ample time to integrate," she said, her tone a mix of condescension and resignation. "But you continue to refuse to share, to be transparent. Your independence, Natalie, it's... how do we put this?" She paused, tapping her fingers on the table. "It's a liability." I leaned forward slightly, the words hanging in the air like a threat. "I've always been transparent, Mom. You just didn't want to see it." That's when the silence hit, heavy, suffocating. My family's icy stares bore into me, but I didn't flinch. I'd been through worse: betrayal, lies, isolation. This, though? This was a game I knew I could win. Laura's eyes narrowed. "We've made the decision," she said, standing abruptly. "We will have a vote. A simple vote, to decide whether you stay in this family or leave." My heart skipped, the blood draining from my face. A vote. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everything. Every decision, every act of rebellion, every inch of independence I had fought for, all reduced to a vote. I met my mother's eyes, then my sister's. The mask of family unity was slipping. This was the price of their love, and I wasn't interested in paying. They passed around the slips of paper, the sharp rattle of pens scratching the surface of each one, sending a shiver up my spine. The vote wasn't about me staying or leaving. It was about control, about who truly held the power here. And I had a secret they didn't know. As the last of them scribbled their judgments, I knew what was coming. The results would be a formality, but I wasn't ready to play by their rules anymore. Not when the stakes had been raised so high. I looked at Laura as she held the box, ready to collect the slips. "Before you tally, Laura," I said, my voice low, the calm before the storm. "I think we need to revisit something. I've got some data you might find interesting." Laura froze, the edge of the crystal box catching the light, a moment of stillness before the chaos. "You're not going to do this here," she said, a slight tremor in her voice. I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly one. "Oh, but I am." I reached into my bag, my fingers brushing against the cold, sleek metal of my laptop. This was the moment, the one they'd never see coming. With one click, I was about to turn everything they'd planned upside down. "I'm not just a problem," I said, opening the laptop. "I'm the solution." The screen flickered to life, and as I plugged it into the large flat screen mounted on the wall, the family went quiet, their collective breath held in anticipation. The numbers flashed onto the screen, stark and unforgiving. A net worth chart that shifted the room, turned it from one of familial judgment to one of utter disbelief. "What is this?" Laura's voice was barely a whisper, her perfectly composed mask faltering for the first time. The chart didn't lie. The lines of my net worth soared far past their own, showing them for what they were: reliant, dependent, barely treading water on the fortune they thought was endless. And then the final twist hit. I wasn't just a member of the family anymore. I owned a piece of it, The room fell deathly silent. The air felt cold, thick with the weight of secrets unraveling. But it wasn't enough to simply be right. I had to make them feel it. "We're done with the games, Laura," I said. "This family was never a safe place for me. But now I'm the one holding all the cards." I could see the realization dawning in their eyes, and I knew this moment was about to change everything. Cliffhanger. The look on Laura's face was pure fury, but the question hung in the air like a threat. What would she do now that I'd exposed the truth? I could feel my pulse in my throat as I watched Laura pull the slips from the crystal box, one by one. The noise of the paper rustling sounded like an executioner's gavel, each moment dragging on in the suffocating silence of the room. My family was all here. My sister, mother, aunt, and cousins, each of them seemingly innocent in their stoic silence, but I knew the truth. They weren't innocent. This was never about my behavior. It had never been about my choices. This was about control, about keeping the family legacy locked in their hands. The vote was a formality, but I could see the satisfaction in their eyes as they ticked off their choices, thinking they had me cornered. But they hadn't considered what I had prepared. "You don't have to do this," Laura said, almost pleading, as she dropped the final slip into the box. "Just sign the agreement. You can have what you want. You don't need to make this harder than it already is." Her words didn't touch me. I wasn't the one who'd made it hard. I had been a pawn in their game for far too long, and now, for the first time, I held the king's card. I glanced at my mother, her face pale but composed. She wouldn't have the same control over me anymore. None of them would. "I'll never sign it," I replied quietly, my gaze fixed on the sharp lines of the net worth chart still burned into my memory. The numbers were not just figures, they were power. And power was the thing my family feared most. Laura's expression hardened. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper of threat. "You're throwing everything away. You don't even know what you're dealing with." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The tension was building like a storm waiting to break, but I was holding my ground. The vote was over. Laura stood, pulling the slips from the box with practiced deliberation. I watched her, every movement measured as if she were in control. It was an act. She started reading the votes aloud, her voice cold, detached. "Yes, yes, no." Each yes felt like a dagger. My heart pounded, a nervous thrumming that echoed in my ears, but I didn't let it show. My mother's gaze flicked to me, as if silently urging me to back down. But I wasn't backing down. When Laura paused, I could feel the weight of the room shift. They had reached my vote. No. I hadn't cast my vote yet, but I wasn't about to sit idly by. The twist was coming, and they had no idea. "Before you read the final result," I said, my voice slicing through the tension in the room, "I think we need to talk." Laura raised an eyebrow. "What's there left to talk about? You've already made your decision." "I'm not talking about that," I said, standing up slowly, my movements deliberate. I could see the confusion flicker in her eyes, a brief moment of uncertainty. This was my moment. "I'm talking about something else. Something you haven't even begun to comprehend." I reached into my bag, fingers brushing over the cold metal of my laptop. The sudden movement was enough to make everyone still. My mother's lips pressed together, a thin line of worry forming. I set the laptop down on the table, plugging it in, and with a sharp click, the screen flickered to life. "You think you can vote me out?" I said, my voice colder than I'd ever let them hear. "You think you have the power here? Well, let me show you something." The screen blinked and shifted, showing them the chart they hadn't seen coming. The numbers exploded across the screen, my net worth, my stakes, my independence, my escape from their manipulative grip. "You see, I'm not the one who needs to prove anything," I continued. "I'm not just the outsider anymore. I own a piece of the family now. You didn't even know it, and it changes everything." Laura's jaw dropped. The room was silent, the air thick with disbelief. I watched their faces, the dawning realization that they had underestimated me, that they had miscalculated. "What is this?" Laura's voice was barely above a whisper, but the question hung in the air, charged with anger and confusion. "Where did you get this?" I leaned back in my chair, watching them scramble. "It's a valuation," I said. "A true valuation of everything this family has." My mother stared at the screen, her face paler than before. You don't have the authority to." "I didn't need your authority, Mom," I interrupted, the words coming faster now. "I made my own." The room was still, frozen, every person locked in place. I wasn't just a black sheep anymore. I was the wolf in their midst, and I wasn't leaving without a fight. "Your vote doesn't matter," I said, "because you've already lost. I hold the power now." The silence stretched. My mother, my sister, and everyone else around the table understood the weight of what I had just done. But there was more. So much more. I hadn't shown them everything yet. I looked at my sister, her face turning from shock to anger. "This isn't over, Natalie," she said, her words sharp like a knife. I smiled, a bitter twist of my lips. "No, Laura. It's just begun." Cliffhanger. But even as the air crackled with tension, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was watching us from the shadows. The weight of my actions hit me as soon as the laptop screen went black. The room was silent, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel the shift. Something had just snapped. My sister's face was frozen in a mask of shock, her jaw tight, her hand still gripping the slip of paper she had just drawn from the box. "You can't do this," she said, her voice tremoring as she dropped the piece of paper onto the table. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I just stood there watching the people in the room. My mother, still pale but more composed than Laura, was staring at me with an unreadable expression. I knew what she was thinking. How dare I? How dare I challenge them, the so-called protectors of the family legacy? How dare I stand here with power they never intended to share? "Where did you get that information?" Laura's voice was low, barely above a whisper, but I could hear the panic in it. "Where do you think?" I said, smiling coldly. "It's my life, Laura. I earned it." A shudder ran through her. For a moment, it seemed like she wanted to lash out, but she knew better. Instead, she stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she searched my face. "You think this makes you untouchable?" she asked, her voice like ice. "That you're some kind of savior?" "No," I said simply, my gaze not leaving her. "It makes me a player. A real one now. And you? You're the pawn." Laura opened her mouth, ready to retaliate, but the words didn't come. She was paralyzed by the reality of the situation, their control slipping through their fingers. The truth was out, and it wasn't what they expected. The others in the room, all so carefully orchestrated in their silence, looked at each other. My mother shifted uneasily, but it was clear none of them had anticipated this. Not the votes, not the shares, not the leverage I had just laid out in front of them. "You don't have the right to change the game, Natalie." My mother finally spoke, her voice tight with anger and something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. "Oh, but I do," I said, stepping closer to the table, my hand brushing over the edges of the papers. I let the silence stretch, letting my words settle between us like poison. "I've always had the right. You just never thought I would take it." The room was still for a moment, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Laura looked like she was about to explode, but I saw something else in her eyes. It was the same look I'd seen when she thought she could control everything, manipulate everything. I wasn't just fighting for money or power anymore. I was fighting for my autonomy, and that terrified her. "You've ruined everything," she spat. "You're going to destroy the family. Isn't that what you've been doing all along?" I shot back, the words cutting like a knife. Just then, the front door creaked open. My heart skipped a beat. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I turned to see my husband, James, walking into the room. He paused when he saw the scene. My sister standing rigidly by the table, my mother looking like she might snap any moment, the air thick with hostility. His eyes darted from one face to the next, his expression unreadable. I could tell something was off. His arrival had been too perfect, too timed. "What's going on?" James asked, his voice low, almost too casual. I could see him assessing the situation, piecing it together, but I could also sense a change in him. His eyes lingered just a little too long on my sister, the way his jaw tightened when he looked at her. "Just family matters," I said, keeping my tone light, even though my pulse was pounding in my ears. Laura stepped forward, her lips curling into something almost like a smirk. "Oh, don't worry, James. Nothing you need to worry about." James hesitated. His eyes flicked between me and Laura, then back to my mother. A flash of recognition passed across his face, and suddenly it felt like the room wasn't just crowded with people. It was crowded with secrets, with things we hadn't said aloud. I took a breath. "It's time to stop pretending, James. It's time to stop pretending we're all just one happy family." The tension snapped as his gaze flicked back to me. "What the hell is going on here, Natalie?" His voice was strained now, louder than usual. I looked him in the eye, feeling the weight of the moment. "I have something you need to see." I turned back to the table, pulling a thick folder out of my bag. Inside were the documents, contracts, valuations, and proof of ownership. Everything I needed to solidify my place in the family. James took a step closer. His face paled as he glanced down at the papers. "What are these?" "It's everything," I said. "The truth." He looked up, the shock on his face slowly turning into something else. Something colder. "You've been planning this. Behind my back." His voice was harsh, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Planning?" I shook my head, almost amused. "I've been surviving, James. I've been surviving you. And now I'm done." The room grew heavier with each second, the air thick with the weight of my words. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, as the silence held, the door slammed open with a force that echoed through the house. I turned quickly, my heart racing, only to find an unfamiliar face standing in the doorway. A man, tall and imposing, dressed in a dark suit. The sudden appearance of the stranger was the final piece I hadn't expected. His eyes locked onto mine, his gaze sharp and calculating. "James, you need to come with me," the man said, his voice steady, authoritative. Everyone froze. "Who the hell are you?" Laura demanded. The man didn't answer her. He only looked at James, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. James took a step back. "What is this? What do you want?" The man's reply came like a cold whisper. "It's time to face the consequences." Cliffhanger. I knew then, as the tension reached its peak, that this was no longer just about family. This was about everything unraveling. And I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. The stranger's presence was like a jolt to my system. My pulse raced as I processed the gravity of the situation. He wasn't here by accident, and I knew it. The way he looked at me, like he had all the time in the world to make his next move, was unsettling. James stood frozen beside me, the blood draining from his face. I didn't look at him. Not now. The man in the doorway was the only thing that mattered. "You don't belong here," my mother finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, but full of venom. The man didn't move, didn't flinch. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Mrs. Cole. I'm here for business." I caught the subtle but telling shift in his tone. The air in the room thickened. There was no mistaking it now. This was no simple family affair. This was a power play. "Who are you?" James finally demanded, his voice shaky but gaining strength. "Why are you here?" I took a slow step forward, my mind racing. This is it. The moment it all cracks open. The man didn't acknowledge James. His eyes stayed on me, cold and calculating. "The name's Reynolds," he said flatly. "I've been sent here on behalf of someone who wants a word." A chill ran through me. The game was bigger than I thought. Who was this person? What did they know? "You're here to talk to me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the spike in anxiety. His gaze never wavered. "The family business isn't what you think it is, Natalie. There's much more at stake than your little rebellion." His eyes flicked over to James, who stood stiff as a board. "And if your husband continues to hide behind his veil of ignorance, he'll find himself tangled in this mess soon enough." A cold sweat prickled at my skin. What mess? He ignored me, stepping into the room, his presence filling the space, suffocating. My heart thudded in my chest. Reynolds. Someone sent him. This wasn't just about money. I turned to look at James, and I could see the realization dawning on him too. Something about this man didn't sit right. His cold composure was like a silent threat, promising chaos. "Whatever this is, it's not your fight," I said, my voice biting. "I'm dealing with my family, not this." Reynolds smiled thinly. "You think you're in control, don't you?" He stepped closer, his eyes glinting. "But it's not just your family. It's bigger than that. Much bigger." A nerve snapped inside me. "Tell me what you want." He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze shifted toward the papers on the table. The ones that had been my lifeline, the key to turning the tide in my favor. He walked toward them with deliberate slowness. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. This was it. The moment everything would be revealed. "You've been playing a dangerous game, Natalie," he said softly, turning the papers over as if weighing their value. "You may have the shares, the leverage, but you're in over your head." The truth comes out too fast. My mind screamed at me, but my voice didn't betray me. "What are you talking about?" Reynolds placed one hand on the documents, still staring at me. "Your little plan to buy your way into the family business, it's cute. But someone else already holds the key. And now it's my job to deliver the message." There it was. The twist. I felt my stomach drop. My carefully crafted strategy, the one I thought would secure my place, was already crumbling beneath my feet. I couldn't breathe. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I was afraid of what he meant. "Who?" I asked, barely above a whisper, my mind running through the possibilities. Could it be Margaret? No, this was someone else. Someone with more power than I realized. Reynolds smiled again, but it wasn't comforting. "You'll find out soon enough." And then, as if on cue, the door behind him swung open with a creak that sliced through the air. A figure entered, taller, with the same cold confidence in their stride. It was a woman. Familiar. My heart stopped. "Margaret," I whispered. She nodded, but there was something more behind her eyes than just the usual disdain. There was recognition. A partnership. "Did you think you could just take control of everything, Natalie?" Margaret's voice was low, laced with venom. "You've been playing checkers, but we've been playing chess." I shook my head, struggling to keep my composure. This was never part of the plan. "You didn't think I'd find out?" Margaret's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You don't get to play in our world. You're not one of us." I was about to fire back, but something stopped me. They knew. They were 2 steps ahead. And now I was caught in their game, tangled in lies, power plays, and threats that I couldn't see coming. The stakes had escalated, and I had no idea what to do next. I'd uncovered a lie, but it was only the beginning of something far darker. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was war. This wasn't just about money. Suddenly, I felt like I had just walked into a trap with nowhere to run. James's voice broke the heavy silence. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded again, stepping forward. But it wasn't me he was talking to. He was talking to me. The words were barely out of his mouth before Reynolds' phone rang sharply, the ringtone shattering the moment. He pulled it out, answered it without a word, and glanced at me before he spoke. "It's time," he said to whoever was on the other end, his voice now curt, businesslike. "Get the paperwork ready." I turned to look at James. "We need to leave. Now." Cliffhanger. But before I could make my move, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, and I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The sound of the doorbell was like a gunshot in the tense silence of the room. James stiffened beside me, his eyes darting toward the hallway. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, each beat sinking with the growing unease that twisted in my gut. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice far too calm for the chaos swelling inside me. James hesitated, his lips tightening as he glanced toward the door. "I'll check." But I didn't need him to. I already knew. The unmistakable feeling of eyes on me, the way the atmosphere had shifted in the last few minutes. It was too much of a coincidence. Whoever was standing on the other side of that door was no accident. James reached for the handle, but the second his hand made contact, there was a loud knock from the other side. A sharp, insistent noise that echoed through the house. I swallowed hard. Too early. Too soon. He opened the door slowly, and there she was. My mother. Her eyes were wide, frantic, but her posture was unnervingly composed. There was something new about her, a level of urgency I hadn't seen before. And it didn't take long for me to realize the calm was all an act. "Natalie," she said, her voice tight, nearly breaking. "We need to talk. Right now." I didn't move at first. Not because I was trying to be defiant, but because my mind was racing. She knows. I stepped past James, my breath shallow as I approached her. She wasn't just here to make peace. I could see the way she clenched her hands at her sides. Something was wrong. Something bigger than what had happened in the last few days. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked, my words coming out more like a demand than a question. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, almost as if she expected someone to appear behind her. "There's no time," she said, barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to keep this from you, but—" She stopped, looking at me with a mixture of fear and guilt. "They've found out, Natalie. Everything. They know." A chill ran through me. I felt my blood run cold, my throat tightening as I struggled to process her words. "They—" I repeated, my voice raw. My mother hesitated, then said it. "The family." And just like that, the walls I'd built up around myself, the false sense of control, came crashing down. The walls of the house seemed to close in, the weight of the knowledge pressing down on me. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the storm in my chest. "How?" I demanded, more urgently now. "How do they know?" Her eyes flickered with guilt. "Because I told them." The words hung in the air. They were like a blade sinking into my side. "You what?" I breathed, my hands trembling at my sides. "I didn't know what else to do, Natalie. They're going after you, and they won't stop until they've taken everything." I stumbled backward, my mind struggling to catch up. "Who? Margaret? Reynolds?" "No, it's not them." My mother's voice dropped lower, her eyes darting away. "It's someone inside the family. Someone close." I felt my breath catch in my throat. The blood drained from my face. The world around me spun, but I couldn't look away from her. "Who could it be?" "I tried to warn you, but I couldn't," she said. "I thought I could protect you, but I made a mistake." A lump formed in my throat. I could feel the anger, the betrayal, seeping through my veins. My mother had known more than she had let on. She had been playing her own game, trying to keep her distance from the mess I had found myself in. But now it was clear. She had been in it all along. I turned to James, who had been standing silently by the door. He was watching me with a mix of confusion and concern, his face pale. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden vibration almost made me jump. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling as I unlocked the screen. A single text message flashed in front of me, the word simple but chilling. "The vote will be today. Be ready." I felt my stomach drop as the realization hit. The family was making their move. "We're running out of time," my mother whispered, her voice laced with fear. "Margaret wants you gone. She's going to do whatever it takes." The words felt like a slap to my face. They're going to vote me out. I glanced at James again. His face was pale, but I saw a flicker of determination in his eyes. "We can't let them win. We won't let them tear us apart." His words were quiet but filled with resolve. I nodded slowly. "I'm not going down without a fight." We all knew what this meant. The game was changing, and I could feel the stakes climbing higher with each passing second. I had the leverage, but they had something bigger, something more dangerous. They were coming for me, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't backing down. "We need to get to the family house now," I said. My voice was firm. "Before they make their move." James grabbed his coat, and we both walked toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, something made me stop. A soft creak echoed from somewhere upstairs. It was faint, but I heard it clear as day. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. I turned to James. His face was pale. "Someone's here." And then the door swung open. Cliffhanger. The silhouette of a man stood at the threshold, his shadow looming like a specter. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice calm, too calm. The weight of the room was suffocating. My heart pounded, each beat a deafening drum as I faced the family gathered around the table. The same table where Margaret had staged her family vote only days ago, now turned into the battlefield of my fate. I could hear the air thick with tension, the quiet murmur of voices too afraid to speak too loudly, as if the very words could tip the balance. I had walked in with purpose, my back straight, my mind calm. But beneath the surface, everything was a storm. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Ethan's voice was low, almost pleading, yet there was no more hesitation in my step. He wasn't pleading for me anymore. He was pleading for himself. "I don't have a choice," I replied, my voice sharp but controlled. "You all made your choice for me. Now I make mine." The family was seated, the room strangely quiet as the minutes dragged on. The same faces, the same accusations. This time, the truth would be revealed, and there was no turning back. I stared at Margaret. She was seated at the head of the table, her posture regal, her expression set like stone. But I could see the cracks, faint tremors in her hands, the way her fingers tightened around the glass of water in front of her. She had been the queen of this family for so long, controlling every move, every whisper. But today, it was my turn to play the game. "I'm glad you're all here," I said, breaking the silence. "I'm sure you've heard the rumors. The ones Margaret has been circulating about me, about what I supposedly am, what I supposedly want." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was a smile meant to cut through the lies. "But I'm not here for your judgments. I'm here for the truth." The room was still, but I could feel the ripple of fear, of uncertainty. They knew what was coming. They had no idea what they had unleashed by bringing me to this point. "I've been quiet," I continued, leaning forward, "for far too long. I played by your rules, stayed in the background, kept my wins to myself, kept my head down for one simple reason. Because you told me I wasn't enough, that you were more than me. But now the truth comes out. And the truth is," I paused, letting the words hang in the air, "I am enough." The murmurs began. They were talking behind their hands, eyes darting between each other. The confidence that had once oozed from them was gone. Their empire was crumbling, brick by brick, and they knew it. Margaret's empire. I glanced at Ethan. His face was a mixture of disbelief and guilt, but something in his eyes had shifted. Maybe he was starting to see what I had always known. The door creaked open, and the air shifted again. Richard Cole walked into the room, his face pale, his posture slumped. He was not the man who had walked into my office that day, not the same person who had asked for help. This was a man who had just seen his entire world crash down. "Dad," Ethan said, standing up, his voice tight. Richard's eyes flickered toward me, then to Margaret. His voice was hoarse as he spoke. It's over. It's all over. Margaret's face paled. She turned toward him, the shock in her eyes matching the growing realization on his face. What do you mean, Richard? She asked, her voice shaking. Richard dropped a folder on the table. The papers inside slid out with a soft thud. You've been hiding everything, Margaret, he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. I should have known. I should have looked closer. The room held its breath. I knew what those papers were. Richard turned them toward me. I've seen your net worth. I've seen the truth behind your shares, your leverage, everything you've built. And you don't control the family anymore, Margaret. You never did. Ethan's face twisted in confusion. What are you talking about, Dad? His voice cracked. You can't just... I'm talking about the fact that I just sold my stake, Richard cut him off. To Natalie. She owns the company now, not Margaret. And the only reason we've been stuck in this family's mess is because Margaret's been manipulating us, controlling us like puppets. And you, he turned to Ethan, you've been so blinded by her that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. The weight of his words landed in the room with a sickening finality. Margaret's lips trembled. The empire she'd spent decades building was crumbling in front of her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I won't be bullied anymore, I said quietly, my voice steady now, my resolve clear. I won't let her, any of you, make me feel small again. Ethan looked at me, his expression torn. You've won, Natalie. But at what cost? I stared back at him. At the cost of my dignity, my self-respect. I swallowed, my voice hard. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to rebuild something that actually matters. Margaret slammed her hand down on the table, her face a mask of fury. You think you've won? You think you can just... I cut her off. Yes, I do. Because the truth is you never owned me. Not my money, not my future, and not my place in this family. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. It stretched on, like the calm before a storm. But it was over. The game was done. Richard looked at me and nodded. I've always known who the real strength is in this family. It's you, Natalie. You always were the one who could save us. I turned to Margaret one last time. You'll never control this family again. Not with fear. Not with lies. Not with manipulation. Her eyes burned with hatred, but even she knew. The house of cards she'd built was collapsing. You don't get to take me down, I said, my voice rising with finality. Not anymore. As I walked out of the room, I felt the weight of the past few years lift off my shoulders. There was still work to do, still damage to repair, but for the first time, I knew where I stood. Sometimes, in the midst of the storm, you have to choose to be the one who stands strong, no matter the cost. End.